Alright, welcome to part 2 of our Social Influences Revision Screencast. We're starting part 2 with factors affecting conformity. So you'll remember the acronym that we taught you, KIDS-GUN, C-I-D-S-G-U-N. Obviously that stands for the 7 factors affecting conformity you see on the screen in front of you. Okay, it is important that you know what these are and that you can use them and explain them. So you do need to know that, for example, culture can influence conformity in a number of ways. So if you look at cultures around the world, and studies have been done to do with this, the highest conformity has been found in cultures that are collectivist cultures. That's often cultures that are in, say, Asia, Southeast Asia, Eastern Asia, and so forth, where the success of the group is valued above the success of the individual. So we all work together to make sure that we're all right. Whereas the lowest conformity tends to be found in highly individualist cultures. That's cultures like Australia and the UK and the US, where what the individual achieves is seen as the most important. So in such cultures, people are generally more willing to buck the system and not conform because their individuality is valued above the success of the group. The second one, informational influence, is the sort of situation where people conform because ultimately we want to be correct and we're not completely sure about ourselves. So in order to make sure that we're correct, we'll follow the group. Okay, so we might sit there in a situation where we don't know a huge amount about it, and your teacher asks you, what day did the Second World War finish? And you're going, I'm not really sure when it finished, I can't really remember. And a few other people around you say, oh look, I'm pretty sure it was 8 August 1945. Pretty sure that's the end of it. And so you go, yeah, 8th of August, because you want to be right, and you think they're right. The third one is de-individuation. Now that's a situation where in large groups there's a tendency for people to feel like they're anonymized or de-individualized. Okay, so that what they're individually doing isn't noticed by others, and therefore often our moral qualms and our ethics can get a little bit suspended. This is the sort of situation you see in riots a lot. Okay, people who go out and loot and steal from shops in the middle of a riot when they wouldn't otherwise normally do it. But the situation presents itself where they're part of a mob, they're anonymized, and no one can identify them specifically, so they're willing to go out and do that. Not dissimilar in a way is social loafing. Social loafing is the tendency for when you're in a group scenario for an individual to put in less effort. Now you've all experienced this one, we've discussed it in class. You've all experienced that situation where you're working in a group of 3, 4, 5 students on a project, and there's one person who just isn't putting any effort in. That's your social loafer, ladies. Okay, someone who in amongst a group feels that they don't have to put as much effort in, they don't have to try as hard because others in the group will cover for them. Okay, possibly you've been one of those in the past as well. I think almost every single person in their life at some point will be a social loafer and experience a social loafer. Fifth factor is group size. Now group size is an interesting one because the larger a group is, it tends to increase conformity, but only to a point. So the group size that's most optimal for achieving conformity and promoting an individual to conform is a group size of 4, and that includes the actual participant itself. So if you have 1 person, 2 person, 3 person, and yourself, that's the situation where you're most likely to conform to what the other 3 say. After group size 4, there's no real significant change in conformity levels until you get to about 15. After 15, it tends to decrease again, because again, we get to that point where actually there's enough people around that we sort of feel like we might just be safe to speak out, possibly. Okay, it does depend on the situation. Unanimity refers to how cohesive the rest of the group is. So if you've got 10 other people who are all saying the same thing, you're more likely to conform to what those 10 people are saying than if of those 10 there's 2 others who are saying, nah, they're idiots, what are they talking about, this is the correct answer. If you've got those 2 other people, or even that one other person who's sitting there bucking the system, you're more likely to sit there and go, okay, yeah, I feel safe to do the same thing because I think the group's wrong. Whereas if the group is all united, you're less likely to do that. The final factor is normative influence, which is the situation where we conform because we want to be liked by the group. So if you've got 3 friends who are good friends of yours and they all love Justin Bieber, and you honestly, you couldn't really care less, but you're likely to kind of conform and also go along to a concert, or perhaps also listen to his music, or perhaps, yeah, look, I agree with you, he hasn't got a bad voice, he's talented. Even when you don't necessarily originally think that's the case, you're more likely to conform to that because you want to be liked by your social circle. Alright, moving on to prosocial behaviour. We'll have a lightning quick tour through this. So, there's a number of factors that influence prosocial behaviour, okay, that psychologists have identified. Prosocial behaviour is, of course, behaviour that helps others or attempts to help other people. So, situational factors, social norms, and personal factors are the three different categories that we look at, okay. I'll skip over situational factors for a moment because I'm going to talk about them in more detail in a sec. But let's look at social norms. The two social norms that we look at here for prosocial behaviour, the social responsibility norm and the reciprocity norm. Social responsibility norm is all about we help others because that's what we do in society. So if we see an old woman crossing the street and she's got 3 bags of shopping and you think she's going to struggle to make it across the street in time for the lights, you'll go and help her because that's what you do. Okay, that's a socially responsible thing to do. Reciprocity norm is a little bit different in that we help others because that's what we would want others to do for us. It's the old maxim, do unto others as you would want done unto yourself. Okay, so if you see, a fellow teenager struggling along with a really heavy bag, or being harassed by, a bunch of schoolboys from Xavier or something or other, you might step in and help them out and say, oh, come on, walk with me or whatever, because you'd want someone to do that and step in for yourself at the same time. Okay, personal factors, mood, empathy, competence. These ones are important because how they play out can really affect how much we're likely to help. Our mood can affect in multiple different ways. So first of all, if we're in a good mood, we're generally more likely to help others because we almost in a sense we want to pass that good mood on to them as well. So we want to kind of help others because we're happy ourselves. If we're in a bad mood, it can go either way. It really depends on where our focus is. So if we're in a bad mood and we're focused on ourselves, we're really in this, how awful is my life, this is just terrible, what's this going to do to me, I can't believe I'm in this situation, etc., etc. We're less likely to notice a situation where someone needs help, and we're less likely to help them even if we do notice it. Whereas if we're in a bad mood but our focus is on others, perhaps we've been upset by a situation where we weren't helped in the past, so we're in a bad mood, but we're focusing on the fact that other people are doing these things and other people are around us and so forth, we might be more likely to help out because we want to improve our mood and we don't want someone else to feel like we do. Empathy is important as well. You're far more likely to help a fellow MLC student than you are to help a 45-year-old guy who's cycling down the street, because you have much more empathy and much more understanding of the situations that a fellow teenager such as yourself might find themselves in and situations in which they might need help, compared to someone else who you go, look, I don't even know who you are, I don't know why you're in this situation, I don't know why you're lying on that bench asleep, I have no understanding of you that puts you in that position, so I'm not going to help you. That's usually the sort of thing that happens with empathy. Either or. Competence is important as well. For example, if you walk past somebody who's got a flat tyre and you've never changed a tyre before in your life, wouldn't have a clue how it's done, you don't care about cars, you don't drive, whatever, you're unlikely to help them. But if you pass someone who's got a flat bike tyre and you ride to school every day, you're used to dealing with flat tyres, it happens to you all the time, you know exactly what to do to pop the tyre back on its rim or whatever, you're much more likely to stop and help them out because you feel like you can help them. Okay? And you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. If we're in a situation where we don't think we can help, we're not going to help. If we're in a situation where we think we can do something for somebody, we're much more likely to. Okay, so switching back to those situational factors that I mentioned just before. This is an important sort of process that we go through when we're trying to figure out whether we'll help someone. First of all, we have to notice the situation. We have to see what's going on. If we walk past completely oblivious because we've got, sunshades on and we've got earbuds in our ears and we're bopping along to our loud music, and we just don't see that someone needs help, well, of course we're not going to help them. So firstly, we have to notice the incident. Once we've noticed it, we've then got to interpret that they need help. So if we see a situation, someone's doing something, and we think, they're probably alright, well, of course we're not going to help because we don't think they need help. Why would you help someone who doesn't need help, right? But if we look at a situation and we go, that person needs a hand. That old woman is not going to make it across the road. Alright, we've interpreted the help's needed. That's the second step. Now we can move on. Now, once we've noticed and once we've interpreted, the next element here is, am I individually going to take responsibility for helping that person? And this is really a really tricky step, because if this is where the bystander effect comes in, and I'll talk about that a little more later on, but if there's lots of other people around, we're going to sit there and go, well, you could do it, Mr. New could do it, Mr. Fransky could do it, why should I have to do it? Okay? But if you're, the only person there, or you think that, look, I can definitely help, I know exactly what to do here, I know CPR, I can help this person out, I have the responsibility here to do something, then you're going to consider providing help, but only if you follow those first three steps. Only if the answer is yes to each of those three steps are you actually going to consider providing help. Alright, so then from those factors that influence prosocial behaviour, we reach factors that influence the reluctance to help. So these are the negative ones in a sense. Okay, so the three main factors we're talking about here are diffusion of responsibility, audience inhibition, and cost-benefit analysis. Okay, so diffusion of responsibility is that situation where the more people there are around, the responsibility that each individual holds gets reduced, because we think, well, you could do it. Okay, and that tends to result in the bystander effect, which is the tendency for individuals to be less likely to help another person when there's other bystanders present. Okay, remember Kitty Genovese, okay, in New York in the 1960s. 38 people watched on as she was brutally bashed and murdered over the course of 35 minutes. 1 out of 38 called the police, okay? Directly due to diffusion of responsibility, and possibly one of the most heinous examples of the bystander effect that exists, okay, in terms of what we see in popular culture. The second one is audience inhibition. This is the situation where you're less likely to help in case maybe that person doesn't really need help and there's lots of other people around, and if I go and help and I muck it up, I'm going to look really foolish here, and I don't want to look very foolish, so maybe I won't. Okay, so we're less likely to go and help someone because we're worried about being embarrassed or looking foolish in the situation. And the third and final one is the cost-benefit analysis. Now, this comes in because we look at every single situation, we go, okay, what is it going to cost me to help this person, and what am I going to get out of it? Okay? Because the bottom line is, almost every situation you're going to get something out of it. It might be satisfaction at helping, it might be a reward that you get, could be anything, but you're going to get something from it. But equally, helping is always going to cost you in some way, shape or form as well, because either you're going to take time out of your day and maybe you'll just be running a little bit late for class, or perhaps you might miss your train and be late for an interview for a job. That's a big cost, right? Or perhaps it's simply a matter of, well, it's going to take energy for me to cross the road and do this for someone, whatever. Okay, so there's a range of costs, range of benefits that come in, and we have to look at those and analyze them to decide whether or not it's actually worth our while to help. Okay. Something I haven't put on the PowerPoint here, but is also worth mentioning, particularly when we're talking about cost-benefit analysis, is this idea of altruism. Okay, so remember, altruism is helping when there's absolutely no benefit that you can gain out of it yourself. Okay, so it's helping without thought of reward. There's a lot of debate as to whether or not altruism actually exists. Is there a way to actually help without getting a reward? There's lots of intangible benefits, like I mentioned before, in terms of just feeling good from helping, or being considered a hero by others, even if the help that you give ends up hurting you significantly. Okay, so perhaps there is always a benefit. Perhaps there isn't. It's an arguable case. But altruism is something that also has to be considered in there as well. Okay, this is the end of part 2. There'll be a very, very short part 3 where I talk about antisocial behaviour and aggression, and we're almost good.